Namaskar and welcome to another episode of 9 o'clock live. Now, you all know, all my viewers know that we've been talking continuously about electoral bonds. We've been talking, this is my third or fourth series about electoral bonds. We had Commodore Batra a couple of days back, and today, a lot of you all, in fact, last couple of days, had asked me to talk to Dr. Arun Kumar. And a lot of you all said that he could explain it, he could explain it in the language that we all understood. And that's a fact. That is a fact. And believe me, you backstage, I've been just telling him that he is one person who can make us understand like as a lay person. So here we are. I have uh, Dr. Arun Kumar with me, and let's go right into the show and let's talk to Dr. Arun Kumar. Professor, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining. And I was telling you, my audience have been writing to me, asking me to get you so that they could understand what electoral bond actually is. And the first question I want to ask you, sir, is a lot of people say that, you see, where was there transparency before 2014? There was no election funding was never transparent. So then why are we blaming the electoral bonds?
So, the problem that we have is that our politics has become increasingly more undemocratic. It is the politics of the vested interests. People want to get to power to actually help themselves. So, given that the politics was very undemocratic, more and more we find that people were spending a lot of money fighting elections. So I remember in 51 when the election was first held, my father was used to campaign and they used to carry with them some chana and some mungpali and some water and they'd go out and campaign. Today you have to fund your campaigners with money, with the petrol, with the vehicle, with food and all kinds of things. So elections have become hugely expensive. So in 1999 when I wrote my book on the black economy, I had interviewed 14 of the members of parliament who were good friends for the 1998 election data. And I found that on an average, they were spending 12 times the election expenditure limit. Now, that election expenditure limit now is 95 lakh, and people are on an average spending about 50 crores. So they have to obtain about 49 crores in black because anything above your election expenditure limit has to be in black. So this money that is coming has to be in black because our politics has become increasingly undemocratic. It is not really a question of representation. So democracy means of the people, by the people, for the people. But now it's become of the elite, for the elite, by the elite. So whichever party you take, it is the same thing. So therefore, this money that was coming in black, that was coming before 2014, it's still coming. But what was happening was that the corporate sector, when it was donating money, it had to be in black because the parties were not willing to accept the money in white because they didn't want to be identified with certain corporates, right? So that's why first the electoral trust came. The electoral trust, you gave the money to the trust and the trust was then distributing it on your behalf to the party so that your name didn't come up front, right? Though, of course, here, because the trusts were open, so you could find out who was donating to the trust and where the money was going. So therefore, it was decided by the BJP government that we want something which will be completely unknown to anybody. So that's why electoral bonds were bought by people, okay, and their names are not going to be released, and they were given to the parties, okay, so that the identification between the parties and their donors, that identification could not be done. That was the idea behind the electoral bonds, that people could donate whatever they like without the fear that their names would get exposed, because there's always this worry that while the ruling party will be happy, the opposition parties, when they get money, the ruling party can then penalize the giver of the money to the opposition party. So this was the basic idea. But the problem is that here the bank could know who's giving money and who's buying the bonds and who's giving the money, or who's encashing the bond. So therefore, there was a possibility of a trail, and this is what was the worrying factor as far as the opposition was concerned, that the opposition said, we will not get to know, the public will not get to know, and that this money being given will get known by the ruling party. and then the penalization would take place, and therefore we will not get money, and the ruling party will get the money. So this was the idea behind the electoral bond system, and which was opposed by people like me at that time. The RBI wrote saying that this will become a route for hawala, this will become a route for money laundering. The election commission was not happy because it said that this is making it non-transparent, because somebody is giving money to the party, that the public should know why the money is being given. Is it a money being given for a quid pro quo, or is it a money being given for a genuine reason? And what we were arguing is that this money would be for a quid pro quo. It would be really for a reason of, because I like the party, because I want the party to succeed, because I want my work to be done. So there are three kinds of reasons why people would donate. One is that they want to influence policy. And typically that's what happened. Vested interests want to control policy. They want policy which will suit them. Okay. So for instance, they would want a contract. They would want some change in a policy which would suit their purpose against their opponent. The other reason is that there may be some illegality that is discovered, and because of that illegality, they want some kind of favor from the ruling party, that illegality is condoned. So therefore, that is the third is that the ruling party can squeeze the party and say that if you don't donate, then there'll be a raid against you, or there'll be some other problem. Finally, the fourth thing could be that yes, I'm genuinely interested in that party and I give, but that genuinely interest thing is very small. Most of it is actually some quid pro quo for some favor that you're doing. And here the idea was that the public will not get to know, the opposition will not get to know. That's why it was said by the election commission also that it be opaque. And if it is opaque, it is not good for electoral system, because you don't know who you're voting for, what that purpose of that vote would be, whose vested interest is being served by the ruling party. So in other words, earlier also there's black, and today also there's black, because what has happened is that of the 50 crore that is being spent by the candidate, only 95 lakh can be declared. The rest has to be in black. So the funding was in black earlier, and the funding remains in black, because the amount of expenditure for election is quite enormous. Second point is that this money was going to the party. It was not going to the candidate. So the candidate is the one that fights the election, and the party can give money only up to 95 lakh to the candidate. The balance he has to find out from the thing. And nowadays the parties are actually taking money for giving seat, rather than actually giving money to the candidates. So the money that was being donated was being used by the party for its own uses, like setting up offices and various other things, like you have to buy out candidates, if you have to break the governments, and so on and so forth. So the purpose of election was defeated, because this money that was being donated is not for an electoral purpose. It is for running your party. And that is where the problem arises. And therefore, what was happening was that this bond was kept for 15 days. The idea was that if you gave the bond for unlimited time, that it would be used as a bearer bond. It would be like cash, and because no action could be taken, and therefore you could use it for hawala purposes and for transfer of money purposes, and so on and so forth, very legally. So this was kept for 15 days. But RBI raised the point that for 14 days you can trade it, and on the 15th day you can donate it. So you can make money on it. And then if you sold it to some other party, then that party may be donating the money to the thing. So you won't even know the track as to who bought it, and in between who bought and who sold it to whom. So therefore, there's a possibility of money laundering. And there's also a possibility that shell companies could be set up, and you could donate through shell companies, because shell companies are used to hide the trail. So if the shell companies are used to hide the trail, then even foreign entities could donate through shell companies. And therefore, foreign entities trying to influence election would come in, because if you are donating the money, you definitely let the party that is getting the money know that you have donated it. Okay. So therefore, the party that's getting the money knows who has donated it, but the public will not get to know, the others will not get to know. So therefore, there are many, many problems that have been associated with the electoral bond. And that's why you see the courts have declared it unconstitutional. So while
Sir,
the court, yeah.
Sorry,
So
sorry.
while the court said that yes, there is a need for secrecy as far as the corporate sector is concerned, or the big donors, because most of the bonds have been either 1 crore bond or the 10 lakh rupee bond. So no ordinary voter is going to buy 1 crore bond. Okay. So it's basically businesses. So they said, yes, we accept that, but the proportionality is in favor of the public. The public should know who's donating. And that's why we're declaring it unconstitutional. So the court did recognize that there is a need for some kind of a secrecy, but that has a lesser weight than the fact that the public should know that who are they voting for and where that person is collecting the money from.
Sir, what exactly is the difference between electoral trust and electoral bond? Except for the fact that the bond now looks more opaque than the electoral trust.
So, the electoral bond was supposed to be opaque by definition, because when it was
Okay.
formulated, it was that, there would be no way of identifying who has bought it. And there's no way of identifying that, this money went to such and such party, who gave that money. So it was meant to be opaque so that the identity of the donor would not be known. Now, it is another matter that the State Bank of India put an numeric number which could be seen under ultraviolet, because they said that for audit purposes and for authenticity, we need to match. So if somebody's bought a bond and it has an alphanumeric number, then when it's encashed in the 27 banks where it was allowed to be encashed by the political parties, then they would know this is a genuine bond and they would encash it, right? So they put the alphanumeric number. But according to Mr. S.C. Garg, who was the secretary in charge of formulating this in the Ministry of Finance, he said, to begin with, there's no way that they can match it. And then he later on said they were not supposed to put this alphanumeric number. Okay. So in other words, it was designed to be very opaque so that nobody would get to know. But as far as the trusts are concerned, the money is donated to the trust. It is known that who is donating to the trust, and then where the trust is giving the money, therefore they are supposed to know. So that was a more transparent system, but therefore not that much money would come through it. And as I said, the amount of money needed to fight an election by a candidate maybe 20 times, 30 times, and now it may be even 50 times. Okay. So the bulk of the money had to come in black. So electoral bonds were only like a 5% of the total amount of expenditure in an election. So, for instance, you can see that, about 16,000 crores has come in 6 years. So you can say about 2,500 crores per annum is the average. But parties are spending 12, 13,000 crores. And in an election, the candidate is spending some like 30 or 50 times what is required. So bulk of it has to be black. So therefore, electoral bond is not a solution. Electoral trust is not a solution. The problem lies in the nature of our democracy. Because in our democracy, if people were genuinely representing the people, then they would not need so much money. But people are not, those who are the representatives are not genuinely representing the interests of the people. They're representing the interests of the vested interests. So it is a weakness of democracy that is coming up in the way the elections are financed, in the way electoral bonds are brought up. And this you can see all around. Like for instance, we tried to prevent people from, IR arms and Gaia arms, the defectors. We have tried various things from 67 onward, when in Haryana, wholesale the party shifted, in Northeast party shifted, and then we brought in these things. Nothing has stopped it. People find different ways of circumventing this idea of, stopping the defection. They do what they like. People are bought out, people leave party, wholesale party splits, the party goes to the other side, depending on the threats and so on. So it's the weakness of our democracy that is being represented in our elections. Our elections have become formalistic. It's the vested interest, whether in the opposition or in the ruling party, who get to power. And when they get to power, they do exactly what the other side was doing earlier. But the difference is that you need a strong opposition to actually make democracy function. So you need a strong opposition, even if the opposition is corrupt. So that's why I've been arguing that today corruption is less of an issue, and it's more important that we have a strong opposition which will keep the ruling party in check. Otherwise, it'll become like a autocracy, electoral autocracy, as some people are saying. And in an electoral autocracy, what happens is that you can make more money. So, for instance, wherever dictatorships have been there, whether it be Apaja in Nigeria, whether it be Marcos in Philippines, whether it be Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, they made billions of dollars. Sukarno, Suharto, Yahya Khan, name. So wherever the opposition is weak and there is a one-party rule or one, dominant party which is ruling, their corruption increases. So therefore, to fight corruption, you need a strong opposition, even if there's charges of corruption against the opposition.
Sir, I want to ask you a clarity on this deposited versus encashed. So it had to be encashed within 15 days, but then it was extended. Sir, can you tell me this difference?
No, so there's no extension of the 15 days. What happens is that when you buy the electoral bond, and there's a KYC process. You fulfill the KYC process, you buy the bond, and then there's a date put on it that you bought it on such and such date. Now, within 15 days, you have to encash it. That means you have to give it to some party. That party has to present it within 15 days to the bank and encash the thing. So there's no extension allowed. Only in one case, what happened was that it was deposited on the 14th day, but wasn't encashed on the 15th day, and the therefore they asked, the Ministry of Finance, what should we do? But there's no extension of the number of days for which the bond could be held by anybody.
Okay, sir, I wanted to ask you this entire concept about this big secrecy that we talk about. Okay, now SBI has details. SBI knows who is depositing what and how much. SBI also knows who the party is who's getting it. So that's number one. Uh, isn't the SBI at some point in time supposed to? I mean, isn't this information open to the RBI, open to the government of India?
No, that was the idea, that it would not be open to anybody. And that's why they said initially, when they went to the court, they said it's in two different silos. So who's buying and who is encashing are two different silos, and they said we can't match them. Okay,
Correct.
and it'll take us 3 months to match it. And Mr. Subhash Garg said right in the beginning, he said they'll never be able to match it, and they're lying. Okay, but then it came out that there's an alphanumeric number. When you have an alphanumeric number, then you know who's buying, who's done the KYC to buy that thing, and then who's encashing it. You know that for that electoral bond with that number, who's purchased it, and therefore you can try and match. And that's why very clever journalists, journalists have played a yeoman's task. They have matched many of these things. They matched it to when the favor was done, when a contract was given, or like say in Bharti Airtel's case, they matched that the money was given, then the telecom bill came, and then after that there's the money given. Then in the case of this liquor gate scam of Delhi, that when the person actually was given bail, and then when the person turned approver, and what money was given, these are very closely matched. Okay, so in other words, this quid pro quo seems to be available, and the money trail is available. Because in the case, say, of liquor gate, at least the party that is accused, the Aam Aadmi party, is saying there's no money trail. You have not established the money trail, and they're saying that the person turned approver after 9 times giving the information that yes, there was nothing wrong. Okay, it's only after pressure from the ED and when the money was given and various other things that he turned approver and then said that money was given. But the point is the money trail is not there, but here the money trail is available because that such and such bond was bought, such and such bond was encashed. So money trail was available. Therefore, the ED and the CBI and the income tax department should get active in the 400-500 cases where now it's established that money was obtained by such and such party. They should find out who's given the money and where it is linked to, say, a contract being given, where it's linked to, say, some raids not taking place, or some places where raids were taking place, and then the money was given. They should try and work out what is the criminality involved. So therefore, what has been done in the case of Aam Aadmi Party, n times more, clear evidence is available, which should be pursued. Okay. So the political party leaders, like say in the case of Aam Aadmi Party, it said the political party leaders, they have taken the money and therefore they are in jail. So other political party leaders also have taken money. So that should be clear that they have taken money and for what purpose have they taken the money. That money trail is there. So here the investigation is much simpler than in the case of the Aam Aadmi Party. And therefore we are saying that, this should be done by a Supreme Court monitored SIT. Okay, why? Because we don't trust the agencies. The agencies are under government pressure. They will not act in certain cases. They'll certainly act against the opposition leaders, but they may not act against the ruling party leaders. And that's why it has to be a Supreme Court monitored inquiry. And in the Supreme Court monitored inquiry, also you need to have independent people. We saw in the case of Adani Hindenburg, where the inquiry committee was set up, people are already complaining that these people are not going to come out with anything very much. And that's what apparently happened. And finally, it got exonerated that nothing much happened there, So here we are arguing that the Supreme Court monitored SIT with independent people, maybe some good retired judges, some good retired police officers, some good retired, bank people, some good retired economists, etc., who will not be under pressure of any agency. And they should be there and they should have the power to actually, call for all the papers that are necessary. like from the company board and so on. So the company's accounts are available, so the companies will also mention who did they give the money for what purpose, so all that information would become available, and then prosecution can be launched against the people.
Sir, what you're saying is absolutely correct. But isn't it humiliating for a taxpayer, an Indian taxpayer? We've got CBI, we've got SFIO, we've got ED, we've got economic offense wing in various police departments. I mean, with all this, where it's surviving on with taxpayers' money, we are saying that we still have to go to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has to put up another SIT because we don't trust these huge amount of forces that we have. Isn't this humiliating as a taxpayer, sir?
No, not just taxpayer, for the entire country, because we are supposed to be a democracy of the people, for the people, by the people, right? Now,
Yes.
therefore, we as the people need to know that how is our politics working. What the electoral bond thing shows is that our democracy is very weak. That a democracy is not functioning the way a democracy should function. That vested interests are controlling. They're doing quid pro quo, right? So it's humiliating for the entire nation, not just the taxpayers, right? That we don't know that there's so much transparency, and the transparency is deliberately being built in. Okay, so it's humiliating for the nation as a whole, and it's a call that unless the democracy becomes strong, we will keep on having this kind of problem. The black economy will continue, and one way to check whether the black economy has been affected or not by policy is whether our direct tax GDP ratio has gone up. The moment black economy is curtailed, more incomes will be declared under direct taxes, and so your direct tax GDP ratio will rise. But in the last 10 years, the direct tax GDP ratio has hovered between 5.7 and 6.2%. Whereas if the black economy had been at all affected, it would have immediately returned to 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then finally to about 15, 16% of GDP. It hasn't risen. It is just where it was. That means the black income generation has continued just as it was before. It hasn't been affected by all this. So to strengthen democracy, that is the only way to control elections and get true representation of the people. That's the only way to check the black income generation and the deterioration in the institutions, because the institutions are not acting independently. The institutions are subservient to the powers that be. And when the institutions are not acting independently and are subservient, then the public doesn't get the benefit of what those agencies are supposed to do. So the other thing that I keep saying is that we are a very feudal nation. All those in positions of power are very feudal, so they bend before powers. They don't stand. So like for instance, recently in America, one policeman stopped a senator and fined him. Can you
Yes.
even expect a IG police in Delhi or in Bombay to stop a MLA or an MP, and fine him? It's very unlikely. In fact, the MLAs and MPs will, show their dadagiri that you don't, who I am, and they will not. So we are a very feudal nation. In a feudal nation, the word from the top is carried all the way down. Whether it's legal or illegal doesn't matter. And that's the weakness of our democracy, and that's the weakness of our system. So we have to democratize, and we have to check the feudal tendencies that are there in our nation.
Sir, let me also talk about the intention. You see, there was a capping before 7% on revenue and 10% of profit. There was a capping. Yeah. So this
7.5% cap over the last 3 years' profit.
correct 7.5%. Sir, this capping was removed. Uh,
Yeah.
wasn't that an open declaration saying that, Bhaiya, I don't care. Your profitability is zero, give us money. You're going in losses, give us money. Your net worth is not even half of what donation you're doing, doesn't matter. Isn't that a direct invitation for people to give money or to kind of.
Exactly. And that is something that was objected to even at that time in 2017-18 when all this was floated. This idea that you can allow people to donate as much as you like, and even if you are running at a loss, you still donate it. So therefore, the largest case is that of Airtel. Airtel was having a loss of about 76,000 crores. Okay, and then they donated money, and Mr. Mittal donated, and his companies donated money, and they were trying to get favors from the government in terms of the telecom bill, and then they own this international agents thing called Eutelsat OneWeb, which was wanting telecom airwaves and so on. So therefore, all this is showing that the two three kind of thing. Now Airtel at least has got its cash flow, and from the cash flow it can pay the amount of money that it has paid, 450 crores or so, right? But there are many other companies which are just like shell companies which don't have. So there the suspicion is that people are giving money to the shell company to buy the bonds. Okay. So at least in the case of Airtel, their losses increase when they give money. But in other cases, there's no money to give. So somebody is giving them money. Who's giving them
Yeah.
money and for what purpose? And that's why the hawala and the money laundering thing comes in. So when loss-making companies give money, there are 2, 3 different kinds of cases that will come up, and that's why we want the SIT, court-monitored SIT, to actually look into all this. You know, who donated what to whom for what purpose, where the source of the money was, and it could be for very nefarious purposes. And this quid pro quo, and therefore, the idea that BJP says that we will check corruption, but they've actually promoted corruption through this whole scheme. They promoted shell companies and money laundering, and they promoted the various kinds of quid pro quo, etc. Their money arm twisting has gone on under this. So all kinds of illegality have been committed. So that's why each of these 3, 4, 500 people or companies that have donated money, that once that full data is analyzed, it'll become clear how our politics works.
Correct. So this check on corruption and all has become a joke, sir, isn't it? I mean, khan na khaunga, khane dunga, and all has become a joke. Sir, I need your expert opinion on a situation. You see, there was a journalist who had questioned the governor of RBI when he asked him that, listen, you know what, the same thing which we just mentioned, that companies paid more than profits, companies have paid much more than their net worth, and why isn't the RBI keeping a check on this? The RBI governor says, look, that's not my problem, that's not our job, that's not our lookout. Sir, isn't RBI also responsible to a certain extent when such kind of blatant flaws in corporate sectors takes place, especially when when SBI is reporting to the RBI?
No, so if it affects the health of the SBI, then RBI would come in. But I would say that in all these cases, Ministry of Corporate Affairs is the one that should really look into it, whether these are shell companies, whether these are genuine companies, and how are they donating money if they have no profit, if it's more than the net worth of the company, how are they donating the money, etc. So I would say that Ministry of Corporate Affairs. But if it was going to affect the health of the SBI, then secondly, if it is money laundering that is taking place, then the RBI comes in, right?
Correct.
Because
Correct.
they are the ones who are to see how the money flow takes place in the economy, whether it creates a threat for the financial system. I think that's why the SIT has to be a multi-dimensional SIT, which would look at what's happening in the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which would have to look into what's happening in our banking system, which would have to look into what are the objections the RBI made when this scheme was being launched. And at that time, I remember the Secretary, Ministry of Finance, said, these guys don't know. So when the Election Commission raised the problem, the RBI raised the problem, then they said, no, they don't understand what's being done. But actually, these regulatory agencies were right, that it could lead to money laundering, it could lead to shell companies, it could lead to problems and so on. So RBI's role is in terms of the financial system and the health of the SBI. If it was going to affect the health of SBI, yes. If it is going to be money laundering, if it is going to create problem for money flows, then they have to worry about it. If it is money coming from abroad, they have to worry about it. So therefore, we have to divide up what are the kind of things that different agencies are responsible for, and then check whether all that was happening or not.
Sir, coming to SBI, isn't there a case of contempt of court? SBI gives first of all, SBI says they will take time till end of June. We all know why end of June, because that's when the results would have been out. Number one, so which means it was directly trying to help the government. Number one. Number two, when they were wrapped by the court, they immediately produced the data as it was requested. Number one. Number two, sir, they first spoke about some 22,000 odd bonds. Then they said, no, mistake. It is not 22,000, it is 16,000 odd bonds. Sir, isn't there some kind of a contempt of court? Shouldn't SBI be checked? Shouldn't the chairman face music?
So actually, there were people who did think about the contempt of court, but the court refused to look at the contempt of court thing because the SBI said we'll provide the data within 3 days. So I think that contempt of court thing is past now because they've given the data, right? So it was about 22,000 bonds, but they were saying 22,000 bonds in 2 silos. and they were saying we can't match the two silos, right? The
Sir,
16,000 crores
sir,
was regarding
may
the
I just
purchase of.
interrupt for sorry, may I just interrupt for a minute for that? Sir, if I lie to the court, which is what I did, because I said that I cannot deliver before June. It is impossible. It's in some 400 different silos and so on and so forth. And then I deliver in the given period. Isn't that a lie?
It
Isn't
is.
that perjury,
It is. Yeah,
sir?
it is. But the court has overlooked it. Okay, the people did make that argument that there's a contempt of court. The court said we're not going to go into it because the SBI has agreed to give the data. This 16,000 crores was actually the total amount of bonds bought, but the data was for 12,000 crores because that was after April 2019. There was an
Yes.
interim judgment, and after that was there. So the total is 16,000 crores. Okay, what was the data revealed was for 12,000 crores that came after April 2019. So of the 16,000 crores, more than 8,000 crores went to the BJP, right? That's why people say more than 50% of it has gone to the BJP, right? So therefore, there are these two different things.
Correct. So the other whatever crores were in that sealed envelope that went to CGI Gogoi when he asked for the. Isn't that, sir?
Yeah. So that 4,000 crores that was pre-April 2019, that data also the court said should actually be scanned and should be given to the, the election commission, and that should be put up on the election commission site. But that data actually did not have the issue of matching, because that was without the details that were there. But there, some of the opposition parties revealed that they had got that money. So part of that data is also available, that who got the money at that time. So even though they were not required to reveal that pre-2019 April data, but they did, some of the opposition parties. And that's why at that time also we were saying that the other opposition parties should also declare. So they should come up front. They should say we received this money, right? And because they were not in power, so that money may not have been coming for a quid pro quo unless they were in power in some state where there could have been some quid pro quo. But the bulk of the money went to the ruling party, the center, because they give the big contracts. They have the various agencies. The opposition party doesn't have ED or CBI or IT through which they can threaten anybody. So the threat was coming from the central agencies, and that's why the blame lies more on the central agencies. And if we want to clean up the system, and if we want to go to the public, because without going to the public, the pressure doesn't build on the party. So opposition has to take the issue to the public. The public has to ask and demand, clarity on this, and why were there so many quid pro quos? And when, as you said, the government came on the promise that we'll curb corruption, and they have promoted corruption through this mechanism. Now you could bribe. Electoral bond was bribing in white. Earlier the bribe was in black. Now you could bribe in black, and you could in addition bribe in white as well. Therefore it is creating worse kind of corruption, So therefore, unless the public doesn't understand all these things, so the opposition party has to take the issue to the public, just like at the time of Bofors, the issue was taken to the public, and then people turned against the ruling Congress party of Rajiv Gandhi at that time. Similarly, in other issues in 2011-12, and the Commonwealth Games and various other, when the issue went to the public and you linked up the corruption issue with the price rise, you said the corruption is leading to price rise, and price rise is affecting the pocket of the people. And we've had inflation, high inflation in the last 3-4 years during the pandemic, etc. Also, there was a lot of trouble, and the money that should have gone to the public, that was taken privately by the parties and so on. So you have to link up that this corruption issue has affected the living style or the living standard of the common people. Then only these linkages will come to the public. They'll understand what are the implications of all this, how it undermines our democracy, how it makes it non-transparent, and slowly, if the opposition gets weakened further, then there'll be more of corruption.
Sir, but isn't this much beyond corruption? Because you see, something like this, electoral bonds, this kind of opacity is definitely going to ensure that it destroys our democracy. Destroying our democracy will ensure that it destroys the future of our country. Our future will be facing anarchy. So, isn't this much more larger than corruption and inflation, sir?
No. So, what I'm saying is that the democracy weakens when you have black income generation and corruption. Okay. And that weakening of democracy enables more corruption to take place. So therefore, we have to check that corruption. We have to check the feudal attitudes that are there. We have to make people accountable, the political parties, the judiciary, the bureaucracy, the businesses. everybody has to become more accountable. Then only we'll be able to check the black income generation. So democracy will be strengthened as people become more conscious. If people begin to understand the issues involved. At the moment, they get diverted by emotional issues. They don't look at the real issues. They don't look at the issue of, say, price rise or unemployment, etc., because the emotional issues dominate. So, in other words, the economics gets trumped, okay, because of the emotionalism, the feudalism that prevails, the weakness of democracy. So, we need socio-economic movements which will actually strengthen democracy in the country, where people begin to see the issues, what the real issues are, and not get diverted to other issues.
करेक्ट सर. माय लास्ट क्वेश्चन टू यू, माय लास्ट क्वेश्चन सर. ये एक कहावत है ना सर, हमाम में सब नंगे.
Right.
Isn't this true to our political system also, sir? End of the day,
Absolutely.
every political party, except for possibly the left, the communist parties, every political party took money from electoral bonds. बात कौन करेगा? Who's going to go on the streets? Who's going to fight? Who's going to protest?
No, so CPM did not take any electoral bond. They went to the court against it also,
Yes.
and therefore
Yes.
they're clean. They did not get this money. But it's not to say that the communist parties did not get involved in corruption in some part or the other of the country, right? So as you
Correct.
said, hamam mein sab nange hain, because all political parties need money to fight election, given the undemocratic character of our polity that exists today. So therefore, now the opposition has to see what? The opposition has to see that if they do not come up in a strong opposition, they'll get further decimated. We have been seeing for the last 5 years that opposition leaders are being arrested, various cases are being taken up against them, etc. But parties are being broken up and so on. So therefore, the future is going to be worse. So therefore, opposition, even if they have taken money, etc., they have to come up front and they have to educate the public about these issues. If they don't do that, then the coming 5 years will become even worse. So between now and the time of the elections, the opposition parties have to go on a big scale, to the public and educate the public that how this corruption is what has led to the problems that they are facing. This is what was done in 2013-14 by the BJP, when the BJP linked up the current problems of the public with the corruption, with the policy paralysis and so on. So here also we know that in this last 10 years, the problems of the economy have been engineered by the policymaker, whether it be demonetization, whether it be the faulty GST, whether it be the NBFC crisis, whether it be the sudden lockdown, and these had consequences for the public. So they have to link up that the problems are coming because of the policymakers, problems are coming because they are doing more corruption, they're getting involved with vested interests, they're becoming like a washing machine, and therefore, weakening the opposition further, destroying the opposition parties, So it's not a healthy democracy. We need a healthy democracy where everybody would be forced to become clean because they'll become accountable. So we need accountability of the political class, of the business class, and of the executive. If we don't have accountability, then our democracy will weaken further. And in that sense, you're right, that this corruption is only a symptom of this weakening. It's a big system which is collapsing.
Absolutely. Sir, I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you so much for talking to us. And as always, it's been so enlightening. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me. Thank you.